So I fell victim to the old pump and dump, and the suspect is NAT. Now, if you're thinking anything other than the stock market, you're probably a pervert. And two, I want to be your friend. Welcome back to Broke Man Finance. I'm one of your hosts, Adam Wilson. Today we are talking about NAT and these other tanker stocks. They're trending downward. What should you do? NAT, everybody was so excited about it, but now it's not doing too hot, and it looks like it's going to continue to drop. How can you get out of this thing? We're going to talk about it, but first, like this video, subscribe. It helps us out tremendously. Now, let's talk about tankers. Why did I become a victim of the old pump and dump? Well, let me explain what the pump and dump is, because if you are a veteran investor, you've probably fallen victim to the old pump and dump scheme as well. So pump and dump is this, basically. A stock or an industry starts getting a lot of hype on YouTube. People are watching videos like this on the news, and people start just dumping money into a certain stock. And most of the time, Wall Street has already been putting money into this thing. Now they're hyping it up, hyping it up, hyping it up. That stock price, that company price just skyrockets and basically gets artificially inflated. They pull their money out and it drops like a rock. Lots of people make a lot of money off of it, and then you have these small, just mom and pop family people that have been putting their savings in there and whatever money they could pull together, because they just knew it was a huge money making opportunity, and they had major FOMO. For all my oldie but goldies out there, FOMO is fear of missing out. They did not want to miss this crazy opportunity, and then they lose a lot of money. I broke a couple of my rules. One, I did not know the industry I was putting my money into. I don't know anything about oil. I don't know anything about storing oil. Two, I didn't do my research on anything to try to learn what the industry was like. I basically just invested off of emotion and what everybody was saying. Never ever do that. Always do your own research, because now looking back, if I would have done my research, I would have learned a couple things, and I'll explain that in a minute. And I probably would have never ever touched these oil tankers, and especially NAT, Nordic American. All right, so let's back up and try to figure out what exactly happened. Back in late March, early April, whenever the Rona was smacking us in our masked little confused faces, the lack of oil consumption was being talked about everywhere. We were all quarantined in our homes. Nobody's driving. Nothing's really happening. But people are still supplying oil. These companies are still pumping oil out, and it's got to go somewhere. Tanker companies like NAT, Nordic American Tankers, TK Tankers, Frontline, DHT Holdings, which I think Frontline, probably looking back now, or at the current situation, Frontline is probably in the best position possible out of all these tankers, and it would be the only one that I would probably consider holding on to or actually buying more of at this point. What they do, they have these ships, okay, that store a lot of oil, and the average price at the time was like, let's say it's $15,000 to $25,000 per day. Now, these oil tanker companies were basically in a position to name their own price, and those stores costs ended up going from $15,000, let's say $20,000 to like over six figures. Some around $70,000, six figures. I've heard of some in the Middle East of like over $300,000 per day, which to me is mind-boggling. But the potential for these companies to make an enormous amount of money was huge. Secondly, it's not like these companies were just like a day-to-day thing. They're not just storing this oil day-to-day. These oil tankers were locking these companies in with these 6-month, 3-month, year-long contracts at just enormous rates. And remember, I'm talking six-figure numbers every single day. These companies have lots of ships, and so if they're making $100,000 per day per ship, these guys are making millions of dollars per day, and they've got contracts that's going to allow them to do that for a very long period of time. The earnings were and are off the hook. This first quarter was just stupid with numbers. Less than a year ago, NAT's dividend was 1 cent per share. The share price was also around $2. Now, the last declaration was 20 cents in this first quarter. I fully fully expect that dividend to go up even more in the second quarter because no one was even, myself included, no one was even paying attention to these oil tankers until like mid-March. And so there was just a very small window in that first quarter where people even gave a shit, to be honest. So the second quarter, those numbers are going to be stupid. And I fully expect those dividends to keep on shooting up like fireworks. When I say that, it made sense. Like these companies are taking on these contracts that's going to keep this price at a very high low, a high minimum for a long time. It's taking an enormous amount of money. It's clearing up the company like NAT's debt. These dividends are turning into monster dividends. Everybody still felt like they were buying in low, even at $7 and $8 a share. The upside potential was huge. So what was not to love about this company? And that was kind of the draw of everybody pouring their money into it because they saw dollar signs, myself included. Once I detached my emotions from it, I got the FOMO out, and that stock price started to fall. It hit $9 one day, and I'm kicking myself now for not selling. But I was like, nah, at least $10, and that's when I'll sell. So when I took a step back and I was like, wait a minute, and I really started kind of pouring into it, there was a couple things that really stood out about NAT specifically that I was like, I just got pumped and dumped. One was everybody was talking about these contracts. Like, yes, these contracts were huge. 6-month, year-long contracts, whatever it was, for just ridiculous 6-figure numbers per day. But then I realized a lot of these ships were already under contract. It's not like whenever all this stuff started happening that with the Rona that all these ships just lost all of their current business and redid everybody's contracts. Now they have 26 ships that they can now recontract. No. A lot of these ships were already under contract and still are, and so they're not able to take advantage of those monster contracts right now because they already had deals worked out with other companies. The most important thing that I've missed was there's no innovation involved. It's not like Apple, Microsoft, like these pharmaceutical companies that's making new products that's going to change the world, and they're competing with folks in their field for the latest and greatest, and they're just driving that stock price up. They just store oil. It is literally a floating storage building. That's it. At the end of the day, that's all it is. They just hold a liquid. So once that's at capacity, NAT, Nordic American Tankers, they're not changing the world anytime soon by floating around a bunch of oil. They're not going to space. They're not doing anything. They're not making the next hybrid car. They're not making the next greatest cell phone. They're not doing anything spectacular except for holding oil and floating around in the ocean, trying not to spill it. It's really a completely even playing field as long as you got big ass ships and you got a bunch of them. That's it. That's the competition. And I guess somebody needs to negotiate the deals. Other than that, the actual product or their skill set, there is none. Even when everything is trending green, NAT is still trending red. Along with all the tanker stocks, it's just not NAT, but NAT is certainly the most talked about and popular right now. But it's still trending red, even when the rest of the stock market is doing great. So, how do we get out of this thing? How do you get your money back? Is there a way to get your money back? What is the best option on the table right now? Well, there's several options, and it's going to really come down to your own level of risk. And I'll explain what I'm going to do in just a moment. So one, you could go ahead and cut your losses, take that money that you sell it for and invest it into something maybe a little more conservative, something that you feel pretty confident is going to continue to give you a return on your money, and you slowly but surely you get that money back. But remember, once you sell, that loss is definitive. There's no taking it back. You sold and you took a loss. It happens. It's just part of it. You got to be willing to take a loss sometimes. It is what it is. Second, you can start averaging down. And what I mean is this. If my average stock purchase price is a little over 7, let's say let's keep NAT here. If my average share price for NAT is a little over $7 because I was buying at 6 and 8. Then at 4.45, I could start buying shares of that and bringing that average down in hopes that that stock appreciates enough to meet that, and then I can sell and basically break even. Man, maybe I earn a little bit of dividends in the process, but it's going to cost a lot of money to bring that average stock price down. It's not like you can just throw a few bucks at it. Right now, let's say, for instance, let's say I bought 1,000 shares right now at 4.45, and I was able to bring my average stock cost down from a little over 7 to say 5.25. Now, obviously, with NAT at 4.45, it's going to meet that 5.25 before it ever meets the 7. But what if it doesn't? What if, in hopes of it hitting that 5.25, it's only got to appreciate just a little bit, but let's say in a couple weeks it drops to 3.25, and now I'm chasing, and I keep throwing money at it, and I just keep losing because people get into that mindset of just chasing, just knowing it's going to go back up, and it never does. They end up losing a lot of money, and they're just stuck there with thousands lost. Now, it's a legitimate strategy. Many people have done it, including Warren Buffett, and they've met that average, and they've gotten their money back and bounced out of a stock. But I'm not a fan of catching that falling knife, especially in this industry that seems to be super, super volatile right now. I don't know a lot about it, and really, there's not a lot to it. And I don't mean to, like, that's not a knock at these tanker stocks. It's not a knock towards anybody. It's just they store oil. I mean, that's essentially all it does. There's no innovation involved, and so the potential for that stock to go to $2 is really, really high. What am I going to do? I'm going to hold through the second quarter. I'm going to see what the earnings are for all these companies. I'm going to see what these dividends look like, and if those two things don't generate some more interest with people and start driving that stock price back up, then I'm out. I'm going to take my money. I'm going to put it into something more conservative that I know is going to make money, such as VU or VTI, something that historically has done well consistently, and I'm going to slowly earn that money back.